Well, this is where I got my start at, where I went to school at. Was school practically all my life here.
People would come in, if they didn't have the car, they'd come in a wagon, and they would, most people, young adults would go inside. The young people would often stand outside hoping they'd see, you know, so-and-so, some boy they had a crush on or something. They'd stand outside and listen through the windows and that sort of thing. It was a very romantic, wonderful time.
Just a few miles south of Scotts Hill is Doe Creek Road, where folks are working to preserve a piece of their history, a piece of Tennessee history.
If you look around at the people, and every time they've had a meeting here, it shows that these people care about what this stood for, like the school and the church and the cemetery where their loved ones are being buried at, and just trying to give it a facelift.
Doe Creek is a little spot near the border of Henderson and Decatur counties. It began as a resting spot for 2 Confederate soldiers killed just after the war ended.
A lot of my father's people are buried here in the cemetery. My great-grandfather was a private in the Confederate Army, Isom Gurley. He was in the Confederate Cavalry, and he was under General Forrest command throughout most of the battles in Tennessee.
Doe Creek School was built around 1870 during the Reconstruction period and was used as a church and a school.
This log schoolhouse dates to just right after the Civil War, when the state was making a renewed commitment to education for all of its citizens. I think probably because of its remote location, this particular schoolhouse has lasted this long. We looked around, and outside of the Sam Houston Schoolhouse in eastern Tennessee, we're not really aware of any other log schoolhouses in the state. The original function of the building was as a church, and to my understanding, several congregations used this church before finally there wasn't any call for that. At that point, a sort of a local hero in a way, this gentleman named Elmer Duck, who was one of the longest serving teachers in the history of the state, conducted a one-room schoolhouse out here. This area is somewhat remote, being right on the county line of 2 counties, and the children of this community weren't really served going in either direction. So for the longest time, Mr. Duck conducted his school out here and gave education to otherwise an unserved part of the population.
Elmer Duck is fondly remembered and taught school here for several decades, until dismissing his final class in the early 50s.
Well, I went there just about all my grade school. We walked Scotts Hill when I was in the 8th grade and took a test. And I don't know, he had 8 grades in there. He taught 8 grades. I don't know how many years he taught there, but a long time. Sometimes he'd have 10, sometimes 18. Sometimes it'd nearly go dead, and then he'd get out and muster up a few more. He liked to teach down here because he could walk to school, you know. Oh, I love this place. Sure do. I'm glad to come.
When the work is completed, Doe Creek School will stand as a mix of original and new materials. Remaining true to the original design and workmanship, the school will be eligible for inclusion on the National Registry of Historic Places.
This particular building, though, hadn't had any maintenance or really much care in a long time. In my understanding, the last classes were held here some 50 years ago, in the early 50s. And since then, the old log building has managed to hang in there with a virtual lack of maintenance. The huge timbers do give you some kind of protection for a while. But unfortunately, rot had set in, particularly on the lower logs, which is very common since they're the closest ones to the ground. And we examined them rather closely, but there just wasn't enough solid material to save. So we replaced these logs with the same species from the same area. Those poplar logs were originally cut right in here. So we got newer logs cut, same area, same species, and worked them in the same way.
The building is replete with reminders of how early craftsmen shaped and constructed their dwellings. But it is also easy to see that this restoration is a labor of love, as residents gather during workdays to extract their personal memories from each log and timber.
One time it come a hailstorm here. It was, I don't know, that was in the late 30s, and they said balls size of baseballs. I thought it was going to beat the top off of the building. Awful racket one morning.
As a child, I remember seeing the old chalkboard in the back, and it would have the assignment written on, and also there was a little ledge where the lantern sat. Now, they didn't have electricity, but they had a little ledge up there, a little holder for the lantern, and that was many times 2 lanterns would be the lighting for the congregation.
It was wonderful to go to school here. We had a good time. I was small, and they played with me a lot, you know, because I was real young. I started at about 5 years old over here. And Mr. Elmer Duck was a teacher, and he was a great teacher. We got a lot of good memories out of him, and we had a good time. We played ball, we done everything running. They'd pick me up and run with me.
We had a good time. Of course, we had the old facilities down here, and I was 5 when I started school down here. They sent us to school at Scottsdale when I was 6, I think. But we had fun. Had all different ages, didn't we, Sue?
Yes. I was young, you know, I thought it was really something to be in school with all this group of children here. And we enjoyed it very much. And Mr. Elmer Duck would pick me up in his lap, you know, and let me read and taught me to spell and everything like that. And I really enjoyed every bit of it. This is my granddaddy gave this land, part of it here, you know, for the cemetery all off when it started. And of course, we felt like we was at home, you know. I lived 2 miles. We walked 2 miles to school every day.
There used to be a bell on the southeast corner on a pole that the school teacher would ring when time to start school. And it stood there for a long time, and even after the last school was held here. They would also toll that bell when someone in the community would die. And the farmers that lived around here, the bell, they'd come and dig the grave. This is back before the days of the backhoes, you know, when the local citizens dug graves, you know. And I remember helping dig a grave when I was in my early teens.
My father attended school at Doe Creek for 8 years of his education, and he played dirt court basketball. I'm told, or he told me at the time, that they had a pretty tough team. I said, well, was it pretty rough? He said, oh, it's rough. It's rough. It's about like football is today, but the rougher it got, the better I liked it. We have plans to try to reestablish the dirt court. However, due to the roads situation and the lack of space, we may have to move it from its original location. But I want to see the basketball court reestablished as a part of the restoration project.
You can see by the turnout today that this is very important for the folks here. And every time I've ever been here, I think this is the 4th or 5th time I've come out. Every time I've been here, there's been a large outpouring of community support. This is important to folks. It connects them with not just the past, but with the future. And one of the things I've thought about it is that the younger generation who go to school in air-conditioned classrooms, etc., could be a good learning experience for them. That in the past, how their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents valued education so much that it didn't bother them to worry about the hot and the cold. It didn't bother them to be in a cramped one-room situation. Their education and their future was at stake.
This little house really provided an outlet or a meeting place for this early community, you know, mostly farm people. But yes, it was very important. I gotta get emotional. Well, because I have very happy memories.